Hello and welcome to this video where we're now going to be taking a look at the very basics of creating splines. Now the reason I say the very basics of creating splines is because creating splines can be range in complexity depending on what it is you are trying to create. What we're going to be looking at today is just the very core and the very basics of what it is we can do with them, much more similar to the lesson when we looked at the standard primitives. So in order to create a spline, we need to go over to the Shapes tab. So I'm just going to jump over to the Shapes tab here, and I'm going to maximize the viewport here. So underneath here, you can see that we have these different shapes. So we have things like circles, we have things like arcs, and some of these are a 2 or 3 click process in terms of creation, much like our video when it comes to talking about standard primitives. We have things like stars, and all these other great shapes here that we can create. Now, as you can see here, that these are two-dimensional shapes, and these are only representing the shape themselves. There is no geometry here, and so you know, these are either used as a guide for something or to build off in order to create geometry. So if I delete both of these and we just use this star here, okay, and then let's just center this how we did in the last video. Okay, so now if we go down to the modify panel, what we can see is under rendering, we can choose things such as enabling renderer and then enabling viewport. And so now you can see we actually have geometry here within like this actual two-dimensional spline has now turned into a three-dimensional shape. We can do things such like generate mapping coordinates, which again is to do with UV mapping. We can change the values here, so we can change, for instance, the amount of sides that this has. So we could change this maybe to really low, or we can increase this to, you know, something that's fairly decent in terms of sides. We can change thresholds and thicknesses and the angle, and so on and so forth. Now you can see that this is under radial. We can change this to rectangle if we wanted the shape to be as a sort of rectangle as it says here. And again, underneath parameters, we have some of those basic parameters that we have used when it comes to creating standard primitives. So we can change like the shapes, size, width, and so on and so forth. Now you may be asking, you know, why is this going to be important in some of these? So for instance, say we had say we wanted to build a wall, right? So we check the line here, we can choose this auto grid, and we can make sure these two options are enabled, and we can, if we'd like, increase the length afterwards. But in any case, we can create some very basic walls pretty quickly without using sort of standard primitives and creating them and duplicating them and so on and so forth. So you can see that here we have created just a very basic room, or sort of open-ended room here. So if we did that same process again, and we did something like this, and if I go to the top view and I sort of click back on that initial point, so if I press the F3 key, I can see what's being created here, and it's going to say, do I want to close? I'm going to choose yes, just by clicking on that beginning point, and you can see straight away that we have a very basic, or some very basic walls for some rooms. So those are just some of the very basic uses of a spline. There are more advanced uses. We can use them to create custom shapes, custom geometry, and a whole different level of detail when it comes to using these. However, we will get into that as we move forward in these videos. As it is for now though, I'd like to just sort of leave this as it is in terms of the creation of splines, and see you in the next video.